Hi everyone! In our last video, we focused on the technical process of weight painting. In this video, I'm going to get into the weeds a bit and cover some additional, hopefully helpful tips, and show you some examples that have their own little quirks when it comes to weighting the mesh. Here's what we'll be covering today. If you have not yet seen my Basics of Weight Painting video, please pause now and go back to watch it. I will be building on the points I made in that video, and you need a baseline level of knowledge or else these tips may not make much sense. As happens to me all too often, this video turned out way longer than I expected. But there's so much to cover with weight painting. I decided to go ahead and keep this as a single long video to serve as a one-stop reference guide. Please just use the chapters or timestamps in the description if you are looking for something specific. I love working in Outfit Studio with textures turned on, but this can make it difficult to see the bone weight colors. So you can use the shortcut key T to toggle textures off while weight painting. Try it out, you won't be sorry. And send some love to Gier and Docteur for this great tip from their conversion guide. Thanks, guys! I covered this in the last video, but it's worth mentioning again because this function is so useful when you are weight painting in Outfit Studio. In this expandable window down here on the Bones tab, you can tick the Show Pose option, then select a bone from the drop-down list and move it using the sliders. It will move all the meshes that are weighted to that bone, whether they are selected or not, so you can get a good idea of how everything will behave together in the game. It will keep that bone posed, even if you select and pose additional bones on top of it. And you can clear the pose with either the Reset Bone button here for the currently selected bone, or the Reset All button down here, which puts all the bones back in neutral pose. Note that neither button affects the weight painting at all, just the temporary pose of the model. You can weight paint meshes while they are posed and see how the changes affect the movement in real time. This is super awesome, but just be careful of two things. 1. Be sure you have selected the bone you want to paint in the upper part of the pane, because it won't automatically match the bone that you picked in the posing drop-down list. And 2. Be sure that you have only selected the mesh or meshes that you want to paint in the Meshes tab. You have to pay attention to this or you can end up weight painting the wrong bone or the wrong mesh. You can also create and save poses here, which is really useful. If you are interested, I have made some sample poses based on several vanilla Skyrim animations, and these can be found in the miscellaneous downloads section of the Simply for Practice demo mod, which is linked in the description. These poses are somewhat exaggerated with extra torque, and they are not perfect, but they are a good place to start. If you want outfits that perform well in the game, then you should try to make them look pretty good in Skyrim-type poses. But remember, if you are only making things for your own game, then the only person who matters is you. So spend as much or as little time on weight painting as you want. In the Basics video, I showed you how to entirely remove the skinning from all the meshes you have loaded into Outfit Studio using the Remove Skinning function in the Edit menu. This is a rather extreme choice, as it is basically a clean wipe of all weighting everywhere. A better option in most cases is probably just deleting bones from a select mesh or meshes. To delete bones, first select the mesh or meshes you want to change. Then go to the Bones tab. Select one or more bones from the list, right-click, and select Delete. From here you have two choices. You can delete from Project, which will remove the bone or bones from this list entirely, and thus from every mesh loaded into Outfit Studio. Or you can delete from Selected Shapes to only remove the bones from the meshes that you have selected on the Meshes tab. Here you can see how the Bones tab is affected by these two options. Removing bones from the project gets rid of them completely, so those bones are not shown in the menu anymore. But removing them from selected shapes leaves all the bones listed, and the bones that were removed will be shown in white, not green, since they are no longer being used on the selected mesh. If instead you need to add a bone to this list because you want to weight something to it, then you can right-click and select Add. I don't know anything about using custom bones, so I'm going to skip that and suggest that you choose From Skeleton. You will then have to click through the options to find the bone you want. If you really aren't sure what to pick, skip the Add Bone menu and just load in a copy of either the naked body or an outfit that is similar to yours. That should bring in the bones that are relevant for you. You can then delete those template meshes after you have finished your weight painting. As I noted in the basics video, you can use the naked body as your source for copying bone weights, and this is often the recommended process. But copying weights tends to work best when the two shapes are similar in fit, dimensions, and position. So I suggest choosing a source shape that is most like the outfit or mesh that you want to weight. Be sure to pick one that you know already works well in the game. For example, a large or bulky armor that extends away from the body will benefit from being weighted using another large, bulky armor as the source. Skirts are another good example, as I showed in the basics video. They just don't weight well from the naked body unless they are short and tight-fitting, so you'll probably get better results using a similarly shaped skirt as the source. Make sure the shape you are copying from does not have any unwanted transforms. If it does, you will get these extra options in the Copy Bone Weights window. I'll talk about transforms in the next video, so have a look at that if you need to clear the transforms, or read about it on the Body Slide wiki page here. If you absolutely must go ahead with this, then I recommend ticking the first box off and the second box on, like this, but I can't make you any guarantees that this will work right. Having the meshes positioned close to each other is another good tip when copying bone weights. You can modify your source mesh to help achieve this. For example, you could inflate it or resize it using the transform tool so that it has about the same dimensions as your target, and then do the Copy Bone Weights step. Just don't keep this source mesh after you've modified it, so either use a source that isn't going to be part of your final NIF, or else make a duplicate copy of the source that you can modify, use for copying weights, and then delete without messing up the source that's part of the outfit. Similarly, you can reposition the source mesh so it matches the outfit more closely. However, just be careful with this so that you don't end up with a weighting that is incorrect for your new mesh's final placement on or around the body. Lastly, don't forget that in the Copy Bone Weights pop-up window, you can increase the search radius. This will make the algorithm look farther out for vertices. So you should generally increase this radius value if you are having trouble getting all of your mesh weighted when you copy weights. You can set this value all the way to the max if you want, but 10 is a pretty good value to try. You can also increase the max vertex targets to expand the weight spread, or even tick on the no limit option. Feel free to play around with these settings if the defaults do not achieve the results that you want. Just be aware that you may get some inappropriate weighting, especially things like torso weights being applied to arms, so always click through the applied bones, the ones that are shown in green, after copying to make sure things look sensible on your mesh. When copying bone weights or manually weight painting, you can mask any vertices that you want to leave alone. This is very useful for targeting certain areas of your mesh. I showed this in the basics video, but as a quick reminder, you can just click up here on the masking tool, brush over the parts you want left alone, and then click back on this icon that has a black weight or this purse-looking thing, with a white paintbrush on it to continue with your weight painting. After masking, you can proceed with either a Copy Bone Weights option, or you can select a bone from the list and start manually painting the vertices. If you are happy with how most of your mesh is weighted and you just want to tweak certain parts, then I suggest masking the good bits so you don't accidentally mess them up. You can weight multiple meshes at the same time, either by copying bone weights or manually painting with the brush. On the Meshes tab, select all the meshes you want to weight, then either follow the Copy Bone Weights process as normal, or go to the Bones tab, select a bone and the X mirror bone if you want, and start painting. Notice how both the meshes I selected here are being painted at the same time. And the X mirror bone is also being applied too. I should probably note that some guides say you should copy bone weights to each mesh one at a time. However, I usually do multiple meshes and I've not had an issue. But please be aware of the recommendation, and if you run into problems, you can weight your meshes individually. So we know from the basics video that Skyrim meshes can only be associated with a max of 4 bones per vertex. They can also only hold a total weighted value of 1 across all the bones that are assigned. You can see the weight value by selecting a bone, then moving your mouse over the vertices and noting the information shown down here at the bottom of the window. You can click back on the Meshes tab and turn on the pencil if you'd like to see the vertices that you are selecting. Notice how vertices painted red, the strongest weighting, have a value of 1 already. This means those vertices are maxed out on that bone and can't actually be weighted to any more bones without reducing the strength on the current bone. For any color other than red, there is a gradation of weight values being applied. Here are the colors associated with the relative weight values. What makes this a bit confusing is that you can technically paint one vertex to a red color on multiple bones at the same time in Outfit Studio. For example, see how I can paint the knee to be red for the thigh and also red for the calf, which means the total bone weight applied to these vertices is 2. Well, this is actually not okay for the mesh. So Outfit Studio will automatically readjust or normalize this weighting when you export the NIF. You can see how the color has been adjusted after I exported and then re-imported the mesh. To maintain more control over this, you can turn on the Normalize Weights option here in the Bones tab. This will adjust or normalize the values in real time and prevent you from weighting any vertex with a total value of more than 1 across all the bones that it's weighted to. With this option ticked on, you can see that now when I paint the knee to red for the calf bone, all the color is removed from those vertices for the thigh bone, because Outfit Studio is keeping the total weight value to 1 by reducing other bone weight strengths as I increase the calf bone weighting. This probably sounds a bit confusing, but just play around with it and you will see what I mean. It's probably a good idea to keep this ticked on. Otherwise, your meshes may not behave the way you expect when you get to the game, since their weighting may have been adjusted outside of your direct control. If you know what weight value you want to have as a maximum for the whole mesh or a large part of it, then you can use the Fixed Weight option here. Tick this on, set your brush strength to the value that matches the color you want as a max, and start painting. If you want the entire mesh to be one weight, then just keep painting until it's all the same color. Alternatively, you can use the next tip to help smooth out the color gradient around the edges of the painted area. For most areas of a mesh, you'll probably want nice, smooth color transitions, which translates to smooth weight transitions too. You can smooth out the transition by holding down Shift while you paint. You can also click instead of brushing, and depending on where you click, it can smooth it out a bit more. To get the full color gradation, set your brush strength to 1 first, and click without holding down any modifiers. This will paint the area under the brush all the way from red down to dark blue, and then you can hold Shift and paint more to smooth it out. This little trick is new to me, and thanks again to Gier and Docteur, but I can't wait to play around with it some more. Give it a try, it looks pretty darn handy. Realism in weight painting is not an actual requirement, but it only makes sense if you want your outfits to look good in the game. Most of the time, you'll want your armor, clothing, or accessories to behave like normal objects on Earth. That means weighting them the way they would behave in the real world. If you are weight painting something made of metal, it is generally better to have a very consistent weighting across the whole piece so that it moves as a single item. Metal is not going to bend when the body bends, so bear that in mind. Some vanilla plate armors stretch when the torso moves, which drives me a little batty. So my plea to you is to avoid weighting metal armors this way whenever you can. In contrast, flexible items like cloth will bend a lot more, and they can be weighted with more varying weights across their surface. This is a good thing because cloth and softer leathers will flex along with the body. If you have a stiff object layered with a flexible item, you'll probably want to weight them separately and slightly differently. For example, if there is a cloth garment underneath a metal plate, the cloth will move more than the metal will, except exactly where they overlap, at which point the metal will probably hold the lower layers in place. Opposite of that, a flexible item that extends over a metal plate, like a leather strap, for example, would not bend with the body, but would behave more like the metal, so you would want to weight them the same. Body parts, especially the breasts, might move differently than metal armors covering them, particularly for more revealing armors. Here's a really elegant example of a physics-enabled mesh showing how the metal bra is weighted differently than the body. And in the game, this looks much more realistic because there is some jiggle in the breast, while the metal armor moves as a solid piece along with the torso. Weight painting can be incredibly complex. Some of the more difficult items include long skirts and pieces that sit far away from the body, even if they are only static meshes, meaning they do not have outfit physics. I suggest looking at many different examples to see what works well and what doesn't. Learn from this and apply your learnings to weight paint your own difficult meshes. Another complex situation is weighting for physics. I've only just started learning this myself, and physics is currently beyond the scope of these beginner tutorials. Just be aware that weighting meshes like bikini tops, either armor or clothing, skirts, especially long ones, and capes to move naturally with outfit physics is a specialty all on its own. I strongly suggest that you get good with weighting static outfits first before you tackle physics. Walk before you run and all that. Alright, so that was a lot of blah blah blahing. Now let's finish up this video with some concrete examples of quirky things that you might run into. I've mentioned the excellent guide by Gier and Docteur on body slide outfit conversion, which includes tips on weight painting specific types of items. I've linked to that in the description, and I highly recommend giving it a read, even if you aren't doing body slide conversions. I've talked about skirts being a problem several times, so let's start there. When you copy bone weights to skirts from the naked body, you will most likely get some weirdness, which can include odd pelvis or crotch weighting, and it might show up as bunching like this, or the dreaded split skirt when you walk or run. Be sure to overextend the thigh bone weights to the opposite side by quite a bit, on both the front and back of the skirt to help prevent this. Read the section on skirts in Gier and Docteur's conversion guide and study existing skirts that work well in the game to see how it can be optimized. But don't expect perfection. Skirts are really challenging in Skyrim. Cloaks are another interesting item, and I don't have personal experience weight painting cloaks yet. So again, I point you to Gier and Docteur's guide because it shows you exactly how they should be painted. Hems or other areas with bunched up vertices have given me problems with weight painting, especially when they include layers of vertices. Watch the individual vertices carefully for misbehavior because manual painting might not affect them all equally well. And as with all meshes, pay special attention to how the bones play off of each other. You may need to adjust the weight on a different bone to make the current bone work better. Multi-bone posing is your friend here. When I'm weighting meshes that cover more than one body part, like pants that extend over both the legs and the feet, or gloves that extend over arms and hands, I like to first create a source mesh from the whole body. To do this, drag in the body, the hands, and the feet. Change the partitions to just 32 body on all the parts. Remove the textures from them all, and merge them together. Then use this full body mesh as your source for copying weights. You can even export this as a tool mesh to use anytime you want. Just don't ever include it in a real outfit because it won't work properly in the game. And speaking of hands and feet, there are some nuances to these meshes when it comes to weight painting. Generally, you will not want to weight footwear to the toes, and maybe not even the feet, unless there is skin showing, or unless it is supposed to be super flexible. Otherwise, your shoes or boots will stretch and flex like toes and feet, which can look pretty weird and is not usually realistic. For short shoes, I recommend weighting to both the foot and calf bones. For boots, you can likely weight them to just the calves, and they often work very well this way. Remember too that unless there is skin showing, you should not include the naked foot in these NIFs. If you have open-toed shoes or sandals, you obviously do need to include the naked foot, or at least part of it, and you can actually weight both the shoes and the included naked feet to just the foot and calf bones and remove the toe bones altogether. This can prevent the toes from clipping or stretching out over the end of the shoe, which I suppose could happen in real life, but it looks pretty weird in the game. For gloves, you do need to weight them to the fingers, even if you do not have skin showing. Glove weighting requires extra attention because you'll see their movements quite obviously during hand animations like pointing and casting, especially when your camera is in first person. You may or may not need any forearm or forearm twist bone weights. It probably depends on the mesh, so test it out and see what works best. And just like with footwear, do not include any part of the naked hands in your NIF unless skin needs to be showing. For shoes like high heels, the bottom tip of the heel might be too far away to receive bone weights when you copy. If this happens, just manually paint to the appropriate bone. And generally, I advise painting to the corresponding calf or foot bone depending on what works best for your mesh. Be sure you do not get any toe weights on the heel, or else you can end up with this. Distortions of your mesh like that often mean that you've got weighting to an inappropriate bone. Other frequent troublemakers are armbands, where the copy bone weight algorithm likes to paint torso bones to the arm. The result may look something like this. The fix is easy. Simply select the offending bone, hold down Alt, and brush over the armband to remove that weighting from the vertices. Or if the armband is a standalone mesh, you can simply remove the offending bone from the selected shape. Another example of distorted meshes are dangling earrings. If an earring hangs down far enough, it will probably get weighted to not just the head, but also the neck, which is part of spine too. This makes crazy things happen when your character moves. Generally speaking, you'll want to weight headwear, earrings, headbands, hair clips, and the like, entirely to the head bone. If any other bones are listed in green text, right-click on them and select Remove from Selected Mesh, or even remove them from the project entirely if your NIF contains only the headwear item. I've got two last pieces of advice here before we wrap up. If you are working with modular pieces that are all separate items in the game but can be layered on top of each other, then you will need to spend a lot of time weighting them. Bring them into Outfit Studio and pose them together so you can see the problem spots. I suggest starting with the inner items and first make sure that they work well with the naked body, and then test them in the game and continue tweaking until they look good. Then, with the body and inner layer loaded into Outfit Studio, load in the next layer and adjust the weighting of the new layer until it works well with all the lower layers. Be sure to thoroughly test each step of this process in the game as well as with the pose function in Outfit Studio. If your set contains a potential third layer, then repeat the process with all layers present in Outfit Studio at the same time so you can see how they interact. It is extremely time-consuming, so be prepared if you take on the challenge of creating a modular outfit set. And the final piece of advice is for weighting mirrored meshes. If you have duplicated and mirrored a mesh to the other side of the body, then you can use the Symmetrize weighting function to transfer mirrored bone weights over to it. I will cover this in more detail in a future video, but here is a high-level overview of the process. First, clear the bones from the side that you want to fix. Then, make sure the bones you want to add as a mirror are already listed in the Bones tab, or else add them if they are not. Third, merge the mesh you want to fix with its symmetrical partner. And fourth, select the Symmetrize Vertices function and tick on the Bones option. Give this a try if you are mirroring meshes. It's a great function and it should save you some time and hassle instead of trying to manually get both sides to match. Whew, well that was a lot of information packed into one video. I hope you were able to stick it out and that you learned something new along the way. Weight painting takes practice, so just keep at it and enhance your learning by looking at different meshes to see how they were done. Thanks for joining me to hear about tips and tricks for weight painting in Outfit Studio. I'll be making a short bonus video next to cover something that I just learned about exporting NIFs. Stay tuned for that, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!